comes by hearing. Hear more at radiobible.org.
This is True News. We report the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help us God. I'm Rick Wiles. Mark Twain once said, history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. Well, throughout last year, I took note that prominent European leaders eerily warned that events in Europe were shaping up to look like a repeat of 1914. 1 century ago, a sequence of boiling tensions in Europe cascaded together when a single event, the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, sparked the outbreak of World War I. This program has been progressively reporting for years that world events and trends will ultimately coalesce into an unstoppable momentum toward World War III. I think we're witnessing such events right now in Ukraine. As a student of history, I'm aware that history is a collection of events and trends produced by recurring cycles throughout centuries of human civilization. Astronomical and climate cycles also play a powerful role in influencing human behavior. You and I are living in extraordinary times. We are witnessing a collision of cycles over the next 5 to 7 years. The war cycle, a solar hibernation cycle, which will produce a little ice age cycle. Astronomical cycles such as the upcoming blood moons, an economic depression cycle, a cycle of civil unrest and political revolutions, and so forth, all coming together simultaneously over the next 5 to 7 years. Truly, these are extraordinary times. Looking toward the future, astute men and women foresee trends. Looking toward the past, wise men and women see cycles. The world's expert on future trends is on the telephone. You already know who I'm about to introduce, Gerald Celente, founder of the TrendsResearchInstitute, author of best-selling books on social and business trends, publisher of the TrendsJournal, and a prolific commentator on current events. His website is TrendsResearch.com. As always, a pleasure to have Gerald Celente back on True News. Gerald, how are you?
I'm fine. Thanks for having me, Rick.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Gerald, I've really become, in recent years, I've really become a student of cycles. And you're an expert on trends. You're looking into the future. I've been looking into the history of human civilization, and I'm seeing cycles that repeat. And I'm just curious, from your vantage point as a trends researcher, do you rely on a knowledge of historical cycles to project where we're going in the future?
Yes and no. What we look at are the current events forming future trends. Just like all of us are doing what we're doing in our life, Rick, because of decisions that we've made, same thing holds true with a society. It's cause and effect. And then there are the wild cards, that nobody can predict, and that, it changes the game. But what we can do is we can look at the similarities. And as you mentioned, the stark similarities between the beginning of World War I and now, they're mirror images, but different in the sense that back then you had incompetent, inept psychopaths and sociopaths leading Europe to destruction. And it should be noted that Europe was on a real high note back then. It was expanding almost into a new renaissance with developments, from electricity and new materials, and it was a great time of creative growth that was killed by madmen and mad women who led the world to war. We have those same mad men and mad women leading us to war today. And I don't say that to be inflammatory. I say it as a matter of fact. They're psychopaths and sociopaths. Let us suppose that this is my first time on your show. You know a little bit about me from my work. You say, I'd like to have this guy on as a guest. And all of a sudden I break out and I say, Rick, I'm really good at killing people. What would your reaction be?
To back away and put some distance between you and me.
And what would you think of me as my psychological profile?
A dangerous person who should be kept away from innocent people.
Well, that's what the President of the United States, Barack Obama, reportedly said in a book that was recently published and has not been denied.
Mm-hmm.
That shows you the level of people. And then you listen to Secretary of State John Kerry with the Ukraine crisis boiling over, and how he, to paraphrase what he said, that this is in 19th century behavior. You don't start wars for trumped-up charges. And I'm saying to myself, this guy have Alzheimer's disease already. How about that Iraq war? Oh, yeah, you remember Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and ties to Al-Qaeda. And George Bush even joked about it at the press meeting that they have each year. Is those weapons of mass destruction under my desk? As 1 million people are killed, trillions of dollars are spent. How about that war by Obama, the time-limited, scope-limited kinetic action under the guise of a humanitarian mission in Libya? How about those drone strikes? Oh, just since the first week of March, on the Monday, till Thursday, 4 drone strikes just in Yemen, killing, quote, suspected militants, which is in violation of international law, because people haven't been convicted of anything, and you're killing people in another country. So what I'm saying is, when you look at the people in charge around the world, whether it's Hollande, Sarkozy before him, whether it's Cameron or Blair before him, whether it's Netanyahu, you go around the world, it's one atrocity after another. Look, there's an overthrow, again, whether you like the government, don't like the government, it's not we're trend forecasters. We look at things what they are, not the way we want them to be. We're political atheists. We don't take sides on issues. Look what happened in Egypt, whether you like the Muslim Brotherhood or hated them. A military coup. The United States still refuses to call it that. Look what's going on in Ukraine. Again, we've been following this piece by piece, word by word. As a matter of fact, and you have the TrendsJournal, it's the cover story.
Mm-hmm. Gerald,
and we did that we wrote that story in the first week of January.
Gerald, going back to Egypt, I see this one a little bit differently than you, because what I see is that the Egyptian military intervened to stop what Mr. Obama and the elitists here in the United States were doing in their country. They were orchestrating the Muslim Brotherhood takeover of Egypt, and the army finally said enough is enough of this stuff. Again,
we don't take a side on it.
Mm-hmm.
All we're saying is that if you're going to criticize one, criticize all.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether we, as I said, we don't take a side on the issue.
Right.
And what we're saying is that it's the hypocrisy of it.
Mm-hmm.
They still refuse to call it a military coup, and it now looks like El-Sisi, the head of the military, is going to be the next president.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we're not taking a side.
Have you paid attention? I've only given it just glancing notice. In Great Britain, you got 2 scandals with political leaders. A close advisor to David Cameron has been caught with child pornography, and a leader so that's the Tory party, the Conservatives, and then a leader in the Progressive Liberals Labour Party was outed as a pedophile defender, somebody who has been working for pedophile rights for years. I mean, so look at the 2 parties in Great Britain. You got one fighting for pedophilia and the other one practicing pedophilia.
Exactly, and this is what I'm saying. You have sociopaths, you have psychopaths, and madmen, going back to your statement about how similar this looks to World War I.
Mm-hmm.
You have sick people in control.
Did you catch?
And I wonder. I said to myself recently, why is it that so few could rule and ruin the lives of so many, and why is it that so many let so few rule and ruin their lives?
There's a colossal story that broke this week in Europe that the Western news media in Europe, Britain, Canada, the United States, Australia have completely blacked out. And it's this. There was a telephone conversation recorded between Catherine Ashton, the European Union Foreign Affairs Minister, and the Foreign Affairs Minister of Estonia. I forget his name. I think it's like Payet. Anyhow, one of the Russian intelligence agencies recorded the telephone conversation, and they conveniently leaked it to anybody willing to report it. Gerald, Mr. Payet, the foreign minister of Estonia, was reporting to Catherine Ashton, the foreign affairs minister of the European Union, that the people who were killed, there were 94 people shot to death in the streets of Kiev in late February, which the Western media made a big deal about. It turns out the people were killed, including the police officers, protesters and police officers were shot by the same snipers. And the snipers worked for the political coalition that took over the government. Now, they were having a phone conversation about this, and it was recorded. And the Russians released a transcript of the conversation. The European leaders know that there were paid assassins on the street killing police officers and protesters. And this isn't being reported in the United States.
Yes, I know. I'm quite familiar with it. And another subnote of it is that the so-called new Ukrainian government refuses to investigate it. And there's also the tapes that were released of Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland talking to our Ukrainian ambassador to the United States ambassador to Ukraine, Jeffrey Pyatt, back in early February, where they're essentially talking about the overthrow and putting this central banker, this little boy, this little puppet, they call him Yats in the tape, into power. And they're talking about the overthrow of a democratic, again, not taking a side, a democratically elected government that the United States and the other agencies around the world said was a pretty valid election, and it was overthrown. And then there's the other Victoria Nuland episode that everyone should really take time to look at, and all you have to do is go to YouTube, put in Victoria Nuland, Nuland, National Press Club, December 13th, 2013. And here she is being sponsored by, you ready for this? Chevron. Talking about, now, of course, I never knew this. I'm just a stupid guy that grew up in the Bronx and Yonkers, so I can't read or write. She goes on to say that Ukrainians are Europeans, which is, I'm sure, news to half of the people in Ukraine that consider themselves Russians, and more allegiance to that, but we'll forget that for a moment. And then she goes on to say that the path forward for Ukraine is to join the European Union, to which my mind again stops as just a stupid guy saying, hey, why is the American Assistant Secretary of State telling Ukraine that they should join the European Union? And she goes on further to say that the best path forward for them is to follow what has been set out by the International Monetary Fund.
And why was John McCain in Kiev in December speaking to 200,000 protesters, telling them that the United States government fully supports their revolution? And then afterwards he did a television interview in which he said that the U.S. would impose sanctions on Russia if Russia intervened against the revolution that was taking place. Here we are now in March, and what is Mr. McCain calling for? Sanctions. He already had this plan. They already know the script, and they're implementing their script as they go. But the public doesn't see it because the public only gets fed morsels by the news media, and they're only looking at what happened today, and they don't see the big picture of how this is a carefully orchestrated agenda.
It is, and I mentioned to you about the Assistant Secretary of State Nuland giving a talk at the National Press Club, standing next to a Chevron sign.
Mm-hmm.
You should read the headline from March 5th, 2014, in the New York Times. They like to call themselves the paper of record, but from what I've seen over the years, it's more appropriate, the toilet paper of record.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the headline. U.S. hopes boom in natural gas can curb Putin. And it goes on to say, quote, the crisis has escalated a State Department initiative to use a new boom in American natural gas supplies as a lever against Russia. And it goes on to say how Halliburton is now in Poland fracking away, and how Shell has made a deal with the Ukraine government to do fracking and oil and gas exploration there as well. It's all about business. And this is disgusting. Of course, the way the story is written, does not indicate that at all. And the second thing is, Rick, I kept hearing over and over, we have to frack away throughout the United States to make us energy independent. And now they're exporting it. Isn't that wonderful? Prices go up here, but we're stopping them Russians. Because, of course, as everyone knows, Gazprom supplies Ukraine with most of its natural gas.
I said on yesterday's program in response to the U.S. news media and politicians are now referring to Vladimir Putin as Adolf Hitler. And I said, I hope no Texas rodeo clowns wear a mask of Vladimir Putin because they'll get fired. I mean, look what happened to the clown that wore a mask of Obama. He got run out of the rodeo industry.
I know. That cheap line about making the analogy to Hitler. And again, the propaganda mill, just to put it into perspective, each night as part of subscription to the TrendsJournal, we do Trends in the News. And I picked up the anti-Russian leading up into this, before Ukraine became an issue, with the Sochi Olympics. They kept building up anti-Russian sentiments in the States subliminally and very effectively, because by the time the Olympics began, Americans' perceptions of Russians was at a 1994 low. And they did things like, you remember they're killing all those stray dogs over there. Oh, hey, don't take a plane to Russia. They got toothpaste bombs. Oh, they're homophobic over there. Look at these toilets, one next to another. Oh, and the hotel rooms aren't ready. One thing after another. Every article that I read, and I read a lot, from the opening ceremonies and before, was always a dig at Russia, subliminally and overtly, and it worked. So that was leading up to Ukrainian crisis. And now people that I know and respect, educated people, they're only getting the sound bites. And one friend said to me last night, hey, what's going on with Russia? Bringing in all those troops. And I said, what troops are you talking about? There's 16,000. Those troops have been there since the late 1990s as part of an agreement. They're allowed up to 25,000. He didn't bring in any new troops. That was a lie.
That's right. He didn't invade Crimea. The troops have been there.
They had been there. It's a 40-year agreement.
Gerald, I read today that the European leaders, they slapped some fairly weak sanctions on Russia, but the Brits are talking about seizing Russian assets. How dumb is this?
Well, again, look at the people involved. Cameron? I mean, how can anybody take these people seriously? Obama? McCain? It's one lunatic after another. Kerry? Hillary? She's the one, by the way, that made the Hitler comment. Yeah, Hillary Clinton should know a thing or two about Hitler. Remember her wonderful statement after they killed Muammar Gaddafi? We came, we saw, he died.
How about Benghazi? How about Benghazi? What does it matter?
What does it matter? And look at her husband. You want to talk about a mass murderer? Everybody, of course, forgot the sanctions put on Iraq during every time that Bill Clinton would get caught, doing something like I smoked but I didn't inhale, or I didn't have sex with that woman Monica Lewinsky. There'd be a wag the dog moment.
How about Vince Foster?
Vince Foster, gone and forgotten.
That's right.
But over 500,000 Iraqi children were killed because of the sanctions that Bill Clinton put on that country under Saddam Hussein. And there's that interview that anyone could go and watch. Just type in Leslie Stahl, CBS, 60 Minutes, Madeleine Albright, the Secretary of State at the time, and Leslie Stahl asking her, was the death of 500,000 children under the age of 5 because they could not get adequate medicine or food or treatment worth the price? And Madeleine Albright says, yes, it was worth the price. We have sick people destroying us. They're in front of everyone's eyes, and no one wants to call a spade a spade.
Gerald, how dangerous is the Ukrainian situation? Will this thing be diffused, or is this thing ramping up to be the event that triggers World War III? It
may well be. You've heard me say this before. Recession, depression, currency wars, trade wars, hot wars. They do it all the time. They will not call what's going on in Greece with 30% official unemployment. In Ireland, in Portugal, in Italy, in Romania, in Bulgaria, all throughout the world, you see what's going on in Venezuela, you see the unrest in Argentina, you know what's going on in Brazil. There's depressions going on for a lot of people. There's no recovery in the United States. That's a farce. So what has happened, Rick, no one's talking about the economy anymore. So we could have the worst economy, which we are going to have, that anyone could imagine, but the mind will be on war. Those yellow ribbons will be tied around everything not moving, and people will again pull out their made in China American flags, attach them to their cars, and blow their horns in support of the troops.
And when they do talk about the economy, they talk about the recovery. And they'll say something like they'll say, could the Ukrainian crisis slow down the recovery?
Yeah.
There is no recovery.
There is no recovery.
Gerald, you have some trend projections for 2014. What are you seeing?
As I mentioned in this TrendsJournal, I've been at this since 34 years now, and I've never seen a year begin on such a note of real concern about the future of not only the United States, but as Einstein said it, to paraphrase him, I don't know how World War III will be fought, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. And that's what I fear is going to happen. I'm listening to all these so-called conservatives in the Republican Party, all talking about more muscular defense against Russia. I'm talking about them, the only thing that Vladimir Putin understands is strength. And one inflammatory statement after the next, just to put this into perspective. The Vietnam War was started on a lie. There was no Gulf of Tonkin incident as they reported it. It's a fact. There were no weapons of mass destruction and ties to al-Qaeda. The longest war in American history, Afghanistan, was fought under the pretense we're going to get that Osama bin Laden and rid the world of al-Qaeda. So it doesn't take a lot to start a war. And everyone has ended in abject failure. I forgot about the Libyan humanitarian mission, the time-limited, scope-limited kinetic action, in the words of the White House, that has destabilized and destroyed Libya and has caused these... By the way, they call these Muslim fundamentalist groups, they're madmen. They have nothing to do with the Muslim religion. They're mafias. I have contacts in places like Tunisia and Egypt and other places. These are people that are out of their minds, and they hide under the guise, and it makes it easy for the media to pigeonhole them as radical Muslims. They're not. They're mad, crazy, sick people. They're murderers, and you've seen it destabilize thanks to the efforts of the United States and its NATO allies. Look what happened. As Libya broke down, Mali went next. And then what happens? France moves in. Oh, yeah. They can't get over that colonial trip that they had before with the French Sudan. And now they're moving into Central Africa as their economy is in the toilet. And unemployment is nearing post-World War II highs. That'll get your mind off it, won't it? And that's what they're doing worldwide. They're diverting the people's attention from the economic crisis that is in front of all of us by bringing us a new theater of war.
Gerald, going back to my earlier comments about cycles, there's another cycle. It's approximately a 306-year cycle on government. And it appears that there's a change in forms of government about every 306 years, and the next cycle rolls over around like in the next I'm thinking maybe the next 15 years or so. If this is accurate, then what we're witnessing is the breakup of the current what we would call the Republican form of government, a republic, whether you want to include Europe and the United States, Canada, the Western nations. It seems like this type of government is falling apart. It's not working anymore. It can't function the way the American founding fathers envisioned it over 200 years ago. Do you see that we're going into a new type of government, maybe something that this is going to be worldwide, a new mindset, a new type of political structure?
Very possibly. And the government isn't working now because there's been a multinational takeover. 4 words, killed capitalism. Too big to fail. It's the merger of state and corporate powers. Again, you go back to what's going on in Ukraine. All this is about is the United States and the EU taking up more of the former Soviet Union. And also, it's that whole neocon movement as well in trying to degrade Russia. I mean, you remember the Cuban Missile Crisis. Mm-hmm. John Kennedy made a deal with Khrushchev. Okay, we'll take the missiles out of Turkey, but you got to pull them out of Cuba. Well, now the United States has put missile defense systems in Poland, and they're moving now closer into Ukraine, and Russia's reacting to this. It's a multinational takeover. You know the numbers. Look at how few banks control the vast majority of the assets in the United States. So what we've lost, and when you look at the populist movements going on throughout the world, in particularly in places like Italy and Spain and Greece and throughout Europe and even in Thailand and other places, it's about people trying to regain their national identity at a time when the multinationals are raping it from every nation. For example, when I was a young man, there were hardware stores. It wasn't all controlled by Home Depot and Lowe's. When I was a young man, there were pharmacists, local guys and women. No more. It's CVS, Walgreens, Rite Aid. When I was a young man, there were stationery stores. No more. Now there's Staples and Office Depot. And you could go up and down the line. There were family farms. No more. You see the number of farms actually declining and the concentration of wealth in the hands of a few. So what has happened, it's a multinational takeover. All of the laws that were put in place in the 19th to 20th century to prohibit the robber barons from stealing everything have been killed. They've been disassembled by both the Republicans and the Democrats. The Robinson-Patman Act, the Sherman Antitrust Act, the Clayton Antitrust Act, and, of course, in banking, the Glass-Steagall Act. So what we're going to see, and I agree with that cycle, and I believe you're right, we're going to start seeing a move back toward nationalism. I am an American. I'm of Italian descent, and I'm really happy. I love being Italian in my blood. My pledge of allegiance is to America. I could never be who I am today had I not been born in this country. I would have never had the freedom of expression, thought, or seeing things through so many different prisms had I not been born in America.
But the elitists have just spent 50 years trying to destroy nationalistic, patriotic pride in people around the world. And that's what they fear right now. And many of the countries that are in turmoil, they don't want it. They're trying to homogenize the whole planet.
Exactly. And that's what these populist movements are fighting against. People ask me, how could it change? All those laws I just mentioned, you don't need a Volcker Act. Just put those back in place. When we were allowed to compete, just because you had all the dough, that didn't mean you owned everything. And then also, I believe in a self-sustaining economy. Put those tariffs back up. We're just buying stuff from slave labor countries that multinationals are getting product made there and bringing it over here. Bring back craftsmanship, a restoration of America. So as I see it, I want a self-sustaining American economy. We're 316 million people strong. We can make our own shoes. I think we could probably pull off making our own clothing. I really believe that we don't have to import apples from China. So what I'm saying, Rick, put things back in place when it worked the best. The model exists. But a restoration of America, a self-sustaining economy, no foreign entanglements. That's the way I see it.
But the corporate barons had to break down nationalism. They had to break down morality in nations, moral codes, civil, norms. They had to break down all of these things in order to confuse the entire world, so that the world thinks the planet is going crazy. But in essence, the guys at the top have been masterminding all this chaos because it makes it easier for them to control the planet.
I agree. It's about money and how much they could control. Again, when I was a young man, there were no such thing as hedge funds, private equity groups, venture capitalists. That's who owns all these companies now. Look, Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace, becomes violent and angry, and he picks up a whip to drive the money changers out of the temple. The only time that I know of that Jesus Christ became violent, because of the destruction that was being caused. It's the money changes.
Yeah,
they just changed their name. To Goldman Sachs, to J.P. Morgan Chase, to the Deutsche Bank bandits.
And St. James said that when Jesus comes back, the rich men will howl. They'll howl in misery because of the way that they cheated the laborers, the way that they deceived people. And it's right there in the book of James that they will howl. So when Jesus Christ comes back, Gerald, he's coming back to deal with these people who have brought tremendous suffering to the human race.
Yes.
Because of their greed and their lust.
Because of their greed. And you said it before, Rick, about morality. The fish rots from the head down. And it's immorality at every level. I compare the Republicans and the Democrats, and I don't say this sardonically or sarcastically, to the Bloods and the Crips. Because they're murderers, just like the Bloods and the Crips. They've killed millions of people for fake wars. And they're thieves, just like the Bloods and the Crips. They've robbed us of all our money. They steal it from us every day. So as I look at it, people learn from their leaders. You follow the leader in different ways. And the standard has been set. There is no morality anymore. And by the way, one of my slogans is morality might, not military might. When morality is restored, then we will have a higher civilization and a future that entails joy and beauty, respect, dignity, and integrity. Until morality is brought back, we keep losing.
Gerald, the elitists are making a mad dash to implement a surveillance society. They're advancing technology at a rapid rate to watch us and to control us. I think that they're doing it because they know they are running out of time. And if they're going to hold on to their empire, they will have to do it with an iron fist. So the question is, do they have enough time to put their police state in place worldwide, or are populations around the planet going to rise up against them?
You know, one of my sayings is when people lose everything and have nothing left to lose, they lose it. And enough people protesting the injustice, you're going to see revolutions. And by the way, I'm all in favor of a revolution, an intellectual revolution, a moral revolution, a spiritual revolution, a revolution for peace. And it has to be, in my belief, a peaceful revolution. It cannot be done with violence. It'll only beget more violence. And there are enough of us. You know, as I look at it, 80% of the people don't know what's going on. And they'll go either way. 10% are destroyers, and that's who's in charge now. And 10% are builders. We need to get those builders out there. And we need to be on one page with one cause. And if we unite behind one cause, I believe we could change the future. As I said, why is it that so few could rule and ruin the lives of so many? And why is it that so many let so few rule and ruin their lives? So we could change it.
That's right. And it's now a matter of survival. I mean, we're at a place now, Gerald, as a society. This is really down to the question of survival.
I agree.
What we have known about freedom, liberty, morality, it's all at stake right now. And
I agree with you.
Yeah. Never been a more dangerous time, but there's never been a greater opportunity to change the course of history. Gerald Celente, my guest today, and he is the founder of TrendsResearchInstitute and publisher of TrendsJournal, and you can become a subscriber at his website, TrendsResearch.com. Thank you, Gerald. Appreciate you being here today.
Hey, Rick, thanks so much for having me, and keep up the great work.